Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling, as well as the news and events around the hobby, where we hope to be informative and entertaining and help you keep your modeling mojo alive. Welcome back, listeners, and thanks for joining us once again. Dave and I sure run our mouths a lot about model paint, so let's just get right into episode 33 of Plastic Model Mojo. Well, Dave, spring's trying to happen in Kentucky.
Yes, it is, and thank gosh it is, man.
It's been nice.
It has been. I was happy to see the ice and snow go away.
Yeah, no doubt. I think there's a lot of people across our latitude in the eastern United States are glad to see that gone.
Yep, absolutely.
It's quite a spell for this part of the country.
Yep, don't get that every year.
No, thank goodness. Well, what's been up with you and your model sphere since the last episode?
Well, I've been a little bit scattered. There's, my model room has gotten back to a critical mess, and I need to clean it up. And I've been making progress in fits and start. Other than that, I'm the mojo's fairly high, I gotta say. How about yourself?
Well, similar. I wouldn't say fits and starts, but I've gotten a little bit done. We'll get to that later. I came to Louisville, came to your town last weekend. And
yes, you did.
Visited Scale Reproductions and spent some money that we'll talk about next episode. That's not the segment this time. Then I cruised by your abode there, and we hung out and had some beers in the sunshine on the patio. It's kind of nice. Appreciate let me drink your beer.
I was happy to let you drink my beer, and it would have been nicer had the pool been open and it had been about 20, 25 degrees warmer, but we'll get there. But it was good to actually see you face to face, have you come by, and like a good host, I supplied you with good beer, and we got to talk about models and got to look at what you acquired. So,
I know.
All in all, it was a great time. So, Mike, what's your modeling fluid tonight?
Well, I'm finishing off some Basil Hayden. Makes a return appearance, but Basil Hayden's 80 proof, so it's a little lighter than just 80 proof. It's not said quite that way.
Yeah.
It's 80 proof, so it is significantly less alcohol by volume than the Bullet by a little, 12%, I guess.
Yeah.
Difference based on 100. So it's lighter. It is lighter. It's just a lighter bourbon, and tends to go a little quicker around my place. So that's what I'm enjoying. I got one solid pour out of the bottle left, and then I'll probably switch to something else if I don't. I'm not gonna make it very far into this episode with this, probably.
We may have to have an intermission for a refill.
We might have to get some good Monty Python intermission music or something.
There you go.
And you, what are you enjoying tonight?
Well, I blame this one on you.
Of course.
I'm drinking podcast favorite Gumball Head that you turned me on to when we started this podcast, and it has since become, I got to say, one of my two or three favorite beers around. And this stuff is just so smooth. It is fantastic. It's got a good taste. It's got a full body, but man, it goes down well. You may not be the only one needing a refill before this episode's over. So this will definitely do for this episode.
Well, that's a good one, man. I think you've ventured out and tried a lot of hoppier beers since that one.
Absolutely.
Have you had their Zombie Dust yet?
Yes, and it's good. I still prefer Gumball Head as my number one choice, but Zombie Dust is really, really good, and I drink the only one of theirs that I've tried that I have not liked is their Robert the Bruce, their Scotch Ale. And I'm generally not a fan of Scotch ales. I don't like that flavor profile. But right. I've had all their others I've had, and I'll drink again, enjoy them all, but nothing beats Gumball Head.
I would agree with that. So we're going to figure out how to get some out to Vegas. I don't know how we're going to do that, but We're gonna let some people down if we don't show up with a bunch of that.
Yeah,
I'm telling you.
yeah, we'll figure that out.
All right. You got faith.
I have friends in the shipping industry.
Well, good thing this is all email. They'd be languishing under the burden of all this listener mail. Again, we've got quite a bit, man.
All right, well, let's get to it.
People like writing in. First up is Jeff Adair from Rome, Georgia. And he says he's just finished getting caught up on all the episodes. So, Jeff, we appreciate you digging in the back catalog there. Hope you've liked them all. You two have a great podcast and look forward to more. And I'm mostly an armor builder, but also enjoy a 48 scale and 32nd scale aircraft. Thanks to Dave, I bought a 172nd clear prop KI-51.
Great choice.
What is that?
The KI-51 is it has the Allied code name Sonia. It was a Japanese Army aircraft, a dive bomber. Think of it as the equivalent of the Stuka, though not as efficient or effective. But
is it open cockpit?
It is it's an enclosed cockpit with an open rear section where the gunner is, and it is spatted undercarriage and.
Okay.
It was an Army cooperation and light dive bomber aircraft. They used it throughout the war. Hell, they used some of them as kamikazes. So it served throughout the entire war.
And he goes on to say what really broke his wallet was a 32nd Zukimura A1J.
Ooh, that will break your wallet.
Those kits are expensive.
But amazing.
I keep eyeing that Henschel HS, 132?
129.
129, that's it. I wasn't too far off.
Close enough. Close enough for government work.
Like I need that kit.
Well, storage of the completed item might be a problem.
Well, that's it. It's really not that big of an airplane for a twin engine. Yeah,
but it's still in 32nd scale a pretty big aircraft.
Well, hopefully he has good luck with his A1J.
Yeah.
Robert Perlman for Vancouver, British Columbia, has got some tips with dealing with our topic last episode of squirrels and rabbit holes. We got a lot of feedback on that episode, and there's another one of those I wasn't sure about, but we sure struck a chord with a few folks.
A lot of modelers suffer from it, man. I think the vast majority of us do.
I guess so. I just probably never thought about it very much. Well, Rob says he's got 3 bullet items here. The first one is he keeps a distraction list. Now, this is something he started in his work, and when he has a rabbit or squirrel idea pop into his head, he jots it down and takes a look at it at the end of the modeling session. Then he realizes that he doesn't actually want to spend the time to investigate most of it. He says it works really well for modeling projects.
That's a good idea. I can see that working.
Now, here's one I like. Don't consume YouTube or social media content on subjects that do not relate to your current projects.
Yeah, I don't know that I could do that. But yes, that is definitely one of the places distractions come from.
Yeah, and he suggests, he's working on a modern Russian tank, and he watches a video on weathering a Panzer IV, and all of a sudden he's digging through his German armor.
Yep.
And finally, boring good old discipline. And unfortunately, sometimes he says he has to tell himself to focus. Modern life is full of distractions.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And at the end of the day, it's way easier to look up something new than it is to tackle some tricky part of a model build or paint job.
Oh, yeah. I think that a big contributor to the squirrels and rabbit holes is when you're at a point in a build where, it may not be your favorite particular thing to do, filling, sanding, painting, whatever it is, weathering, whatever it is. And that makes it that much easier for you to look away from that project and go, you know what, I'm interested in looking up something else. I'll be right back. And then you're never right back. So,
well, he closes saying, I don't think there's an easy answer to this one. The modern iteration of the internet was designed to constantly fracture our attention.
Yes.
And that can easily bleed over into other aspects of our lives.
Yep. I would not.
Amen.
I would not trade the modern internet because there's so much great out of it. But yes, it is absolutely designed to take whatever level of ADHD that you have and amp it up to 1,000.
Next up is Don Gilman from Texas. He's got a lot of hobbies, let me tell you that.
He's like the uncle.
Yeah, he is. You look at this list.
Yep.
He's an engineer, project manager, brewer, cyclist, modeler, and curator.
Yep. It sounds like the uncle.
Which would be accountant, master chef, cyclist, modeler, astronomer,
ham radio
operator.
Yep.
And beer drinking.
That's a given.
Yes. All right. Well, back to Don, since he actually wrote the email. He sent us some pictures of his Tamiya 48 scale P38 that he's just knocked out, and kind of all in his theme of what am I doing to get better. He says it's a milestone, but a milestone in a lifelong journey, which that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Lessons learned. Do not install anything sticking out of the landing gear bays. He's talking about his build sequence here.
Yeah.
That results in several broken parts, all repaired or fabricated when the rug monster got one of them.
that actually is an issue, because I am seeing aircraft model manufacturers. Any number of them now are manufacturing kits where they want you to install the gear. They want the gear the legs trapped in the gear well early in the build, so that throughout the build you have those things sticking out. In fact, the Trumpeter TU-128 that I've got on and off again is designed that way, and that invites exactly the problem he experienced.
Oh, no doubt. I thought floats on the bottom of the plane were bad. I can't imagine a couple of spindly 72nd or 48 scale landing gear struts.
Yep. Destined.
Another lesson learned is use the lacquer rattle cans.
Now, I do like the Mr. Surfacer 1500 Black, which of course is lacquer. I shoot all the primer out of a rattle can, but I have never tried actual painting with finish painting with a rattle can.
Well, let me look here, because this is a olive drab P38. I assume it's olive drab over
neutral gray,
over gray under. Yeah. And I don't know if painted top and bottom with the S is spray. 6 and 7, which are lacquer. So I guess he did. Interesting. With a scheme that doesn't have like tight camo pattern on it, that might work.
No, yeah. I've just never done it, but yeah, I can see it working, especially if it sprays like that Mr. Surfacer does.
Well, those Tamiya cans spray pretty good. More putty sooner. Now, I don't know if he means that he's got to go back and touch it up a second time. I don't know. If I use a lot of putty and then sand it out, I usually come back and found it shrank more than I thought it was going to after it dried.
I am working on, in the spirit of my modeling friend and guru, Scott Skippy King, one of the things that makes his build so great is that he takes his time with fit, so that test fit sand, alignment check sand, before he ever actually glues pieces together. So that when he actually does, he rarely, if ever, uses any significant filler. And man, I do think that while he builds a little bit too slow, I do think that careful approach really minimizes the need for filler. And if you can minimize the need for filler, you're much better off.
Yeah, maybe that's his zen, man, to getting it just right.
It is.
Was it Skippy or was it Dave Crouch who was carving the propellers?
Well, Skippy has carved propellers, and I think Dave Crouch has also carved propellers. That's a skill among World War I modelers who actually use laminates of wood, to get that laminated wood look in their World War I propellers, and that is a common skill among World War I aircraft builders.
Well, I was, before we get into that too much, I was just kind of saying that's kind of in the vein of the way he builds, so I can relate to that. Then he goes on to say, canopy masking is hard. Weathering is hard.
Canopy masking is much less hard if you only build kits with pre-cut canopy masks. And that is one of the things that I have sworn to do from now on, because I hate masking canopies and life's too short. And there are plenty of kits I've got that I want to build where you have commercially available masks. So that is one of the things I really do think that is one of the great advances in modeling in the last 20 years, are pre-cut canopy masks.
And another one, wheels are hard. Buy third-party replacements.
In general, I agree with that, especially if the kit part is two halves of a wheel, because that seam is just, especially if there's a tread pattern, that seam is just terrible. And there are so many good third-party aftermarket wheels. Barracuda Cows, in their Barracuda Cast resin line, they do tons of wheels in 72nd scale, 48th, and even some 32nd. And the level of casting detail on those things is amazing. So I've always thought that aftermarket wheels are worth getting.
He continues to evolve the keep away from the rug monster game.
I solved that by not having carpet in my model room, but I still end up having pieces, losing pieces on the floor, and I can't find them until after the build.
And you got to do the stand up from the rolling chair and not move the chair so you don't cast her over the part, right?
Exactly. Yes, which is always particularly fun.
And then his final point is pay more attention to the type of paint you buy. I didn't realize my gun black was enamel, so it wasn't thin properly. We'll get more into paint later.
Yep.
Oh, and he's got a modeling fluid line. He's mostly an Angel's Envy rye fan and a Glen Morangi 12-year Highland Scotch and sherry cask. That stuff is good.
Yes.
And he's a brewer, like we said before. He's got a few of his own Baltic porters, a lavender saison, and a Belgian white lager. So, Don, you can tell the post office there's no liquids in that box, and we'll send you our address.
Yeah, exactly. Especially that Belgian white. I like Belgian whites.
Moving on, I think this is one of your buddies, you and Jim Bates.
Yeah.
Tim Nelson.
Tim Nelson out of Seattle, Washington.
Yeah. All right. He didn't tell. So
the man, in fact, Tim Nelson is the guy who actually originated the phrase, "What's your plan for getting better?"
Well, thank you for that, Tim. We're stealing it.
Yes.
Great episode as always, despite having Jim Bates. There you go, Jim. You guys you can hash that out over beer. He says he's had an epiphany in recent years, and that is, I can't build everything. Well, we're all there.
Yep.
This is all going to be related to episode 32 again, and he's got quite a few bullet points, focusing mainly on his core interests, so as to build collections: vintage, civil aircraft, air races, experimentals, racers, factual space, that sort of thing. He enjoys the occasional palette cleanser, some ships or autos or quick builds, low part count, modern tool kits like 72nd scale armor. Now, here's a good one. Maintain a 3-year lookout chart.
That's
no way.
Not a bad idea.
No,
he doesn't say it can't constantly change.
Well, no, he does say it. He pencils it in, and it's fluid.
Yes, I was going to say that's not a bad idea. I mean, prior planning prevents poor performance.
But if it's in pencil and fluid, then
you don't want to lock in completely.
All right. From my engineering perspective, that's a make myself feel good move there. I don't think that's going to work out.
That's okay. If it makes you feel better, that's accomplished something.
He does say it ensures he commits to club displays at the Museum of Flight there in Seattle.
Yeah.
And he says these commitments are a great incentive to finish models. I disagree again.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me generally. I think I noted in a previous episode that anytime I get involved in a group or challenge build or something like that, the enthusiasm may start off high, but it just dies halfway through the project.
I've never had success in that. So Tim, you're a better man than us if you're getting through those club display builds and
Well,
persevering, because it's a good way to end up building something you're not interested in, which means
yeah.
I will never finish it.
Yeah, well, Tim is a better man than both of us because you should see his models. He does a lot of scratch building and building vacs and other strange and esoteric models. He is a very, very good modeler.
Except that you may not have 100% of the information you need to answer all the questions you have about a subject.
Yep.
And you got to make an educated guess and accept the risk that you may be wrong.
Yep, I completely agree with that.
I do too, and I've struggled with that one, but I've actually had some success though. Generally, build pairs of models as we discussed to stagger the build stages, and he also says this is a little tough or illusory, leveraging economy of scale. So if you got 2 or 3 models going at once that all use the same paint,
right?
You can kind of double or triple down there. He says it's a little overwhelming keeping track of everything, but that's a good point.
Stu Cox, our club president, we call him Optimus Primer because he has so many models in the primer stage. And actually what he does is he builds 2 or 3 models, gets them primed and has them set aside. And then when he's going to paint, if 2 or 3 of the subjects use, Africa Corps yellow or U.S. Army olive drab or whatever, he paints them together in groups, and it works for him.
If charting new modeling territory, i.e. your plan for getting better, he suggests using a mule.
Yep. I have not used mules nearly enough, and that's one of my 2021 resolutions is more paint, more experimentation on paint mules.
Except the occasional squirrel that immediately moves to the top of the build list queue. Okay.
Occasional.
Occasional. That's the key word there is occasional. Yeah. He put squirrel in quotes. He should put occasional in quotes.
Yeah. Or occasional squirrel. Maybe that can be our podcast mascot.
I guess so. Focus more on process and less on results, which ends up giving you a better result. Now, that's a take on your Navy SEAL saying there.
Yep. Slow is steady and steady is fast.
Enjoy and learn from the work and passions of others.
Yeah.
That one I struggle with because a lot of times it gets to the point where the work of others kind of makes me not want to build anything.
Well, you don't want to use it to make yourself feel bad, but you can use it as inspiration. I have this comment where I say when I talk about coming home from the IPMS Nationals every time, I have 2 opposite reactions at the IPMS Nationals. One, I look at all these fantastic models and I get really fired up and want to build and inspired and all. And then I also go to the Nationals, look at all these fantastic models and go, oh my God, I can't do this. I need to give it up. So, it's kind of a balanced thing, but yeah, if you do accept your limitations, you will end up being overall happier with your what you produce. And I think what you produce will be better.
And that's not just a modeling statement.
Yeah, well, that's true. It's a kind of a life statement.
If we want to get philosophical here.
Yeah, we're not gonna be Stuart Smalley.
James Culata from Whittier, California. His solution to squirrels and rabbit holes is limiting yourself to 1 build or quote maybe 2 at a time and keep the stash small. Now, you talk about discipline.
Yeah.
He says that if he gets into a project and takes a lot of time researching and watching videos and such, if he does that for too long, his interest can start to wane. He starts looking at other crap to buy and build.
Yeah, well, there is some truth to that.
No, I think so. So he's kind of a serial builder, kind of like me, like I used to be.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to be that. But for him, it helps complete by doing it 1 kit at a time and keeping the stash small. So some good points there.
Well, if I could go back and change things, I might try and make my stash a little smaller, or might not have bought everything that I have bought and have squirreled away around the house. But I have plans for everything. Every model I've ever bought, I had plans for it the moment I bought it. This is what I want to do with it. It's just finding the time and getting around to it.
Well, John Ozaka from Pahrump, Nevada is also guilty of squirrels and rabbit holes. And he says he was once told by a modeler friend, "You are not a real modeler unless you had at least 10 works in progress on your bench." He says he only built one at a time, but when he really looked around, he counted 17.
Yep, I feel that, but the shelf of shame is large, man.
That's right. And he has to agree Google is a boon for modeling, but is the biggest rabbit hole known to exist, basically. All right. Well, he hopes to meet us in Las Vegas and have some modeling fluid with us. So
absolutely.
We'll appreciate that.
I hear they actually have modeling fluid of many types in Las Vegas.
Well, we're going to bring some of our own anyway.
That's right.
Alec K from Northeast Wisconsin. Pretty much he just can't keep his head wrapped around doing more than one at a time. So he's deeply immersed in a single subject, and trying to get into more is just says beyond his capability. One major side benefit of this approach is he gets to skip the self-loathing and the unfinished shelf queens.
Yeah.
So another one at a time guy.
If you can do that, that's fantastic. I would not argue that's not the best way to do it. I just don't have that ability. I've got to have at least two going at one time, preferably one in the paint booth and one in the construction stage.
John Vickus, I think he's one of your mosquito bill buddies.
Yes, he is.
He says a lot here, but I'm going to hit his main point here. Many years ago, he came up with a mathematical formula for rabbit holes.
Oh, God.
The probability of finishing is equal to the inverse of the number of references to the third power.
That's probably true. I do think there is an ability to over-research a subject where you get so lost in the minutia. Now, keep in mind, I'd be willing to take John's word on this, because I think at last count he has something like 70 or 80 half-finished projects.
Well, he alluded to that in a prior listener mail, but
yes,
he must have I think it's because he has a lot of reference material based on this email.
He does. Tons.
So folks know what we're doing. The probability of finishing a model using only one reference source, which is usually the kit instructions, is 1. Because 1 over the cube, the third power of 1 is a 1.
1. Yep.
If you have 2 reference sources, the probability drops to 1/8 that you're going to finish it. If you have 3 reference sources, it drops to 1/27th. So you can see where that's going.
Yeah. Yep. And while I'm not sure the mathematics are that bad, I think the general rule of thumb is probably correct. I might argue with the powers there, but as far as the basic mathematical formula, I do think that he's correct.
Well, hell, I'm never going to get anything done.
Yeah, well, it's well, I don't want to go there.
Yeah, you do.
Take a shot.
Danny St. Laurent. It's an interesting question here, Dave.
Okay.
And I actually think that maybe the guys at Scale Model Podcast are going to tackle this one soon. What do you guys do when you run out of space? Having a hard time to decide what to do with the older projects?
I have encountered 2 types of modelers, and they tend to fall in one of 2 camps. There are people who, when they finish the model, they carefully display it on a shelf with all of their other finished stuff. And to them, the finished product is important as a finished product. And then there are guys who, when they finish the model, now this is an extreme exaggeration, but it conveys the attitude. when they finished the model, they could look at it for 5 minutes, get a hammer out, crush it, and throw it in the trash. That for them, the completed model is a completed model. It's not anything special to them. They're getting their enjoyment out of the process. And once the model's done, they'll give it away to the first guy who says, here, you want this? Yeah. I mean, because they have no emotional investment in the finished product.
We got a repeat from Father Deacon Raphael Shelton, our scale model padre out of Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
All right.
Now this one's fun. Again, episode 32, context. I thought I was some kind of weirdo, but Jim's experience almost exactly describes my own bench. I have a fear of painting and no indoor airbrush space. Plus 10 plus projects, all in various stages of not doneness. Or maybe that just means I'm the same kind of weirdo as Jim. I don't know. He said he was just flabbergasted when he learned that other modelers build just one thing at a time, or even have one thing in each stage at a time. As Jim said, are they on drugs? If nothing else, it's good for me to hear that I'm not alone in my version of model weirdness. Well, thank you, Father Deacon Shelton.
Absolutely. You are not alone. There are plenty of people like you. And as far as production goes, if you can find some way to get yourself a dedicated painting space, be it in a garage or, one of these little outbuildings that you can buy at Lowe's or Home Depot and drop in your backyard if you don't have the space in the house, if you can have a little modeling shed. But having that dedicated space to paint really does drive the finish of a lot of projects. Because if you have to wait for the weather to be good or something like that, you can quickly get a traffic jam all built up at the paint booth.
Next one up is Derek Post from Des Moines, Iowa. And he's back into the hobby after a 27-year hiatus.
Yay, welcome back.
Since about 3 years, so it's not a lockdown kind of comeback like a lot of these are, but still 27 years, that's a long time.
Yep.
He dug up a bunch of models in storage from his high school years, and he's added a couple new builds in his first year here, but he says he solved his Shelf of Doom issue by forcing himself to finish one dead model for every new one he starts.
That is a good strategy, and one I would like to implement myself if I could bring myself to do it.
And he says the one he's most proud of was the last one that was given to him by his grandparents. So I imagine that's probably been in storage a while. And he says that a finished model always looks better than anything not finished. That's a truism there.
That is absolutely true.
And then he's gone on to throw the gauntlet down in the Mediocre Modelers page on Facebook. Now, Mediocre Modelers, is that Andy from Andy Hobby Headquarters runs that one?
It may be. I can't. God, there's so much social media. I can't keep it all straight. I don't want to associate somebody incorrectly, but that may be.
Anyway, he says he's the leader of the pack on his challenge, and now he's got nothing on the Shelf of Doom. So
that's an accomplishment, my brother.
Good on you, man.
Yes.
Now, this final one comes through our Facebook page. I just want to give this gentleman a shout out, Mr. Brian Dinklau. We've had a rather protracted conversation with him over the last few weeks on Facebook Messenger, and not that's a bad thing. He's posted some good beers. He's got a Voodoo Ranger on there and a Zombie Dust, and he's kind of a machining Krieger sci-fi kind of guy, and he's really, really talented. So we appreciate all the comment, and we look forward to seeing more of your work, Brian.
Yeah, and generally all of you guys out there listening, and maybe ladies, who knows, there might be one listening somewhere. One of the big enjoyments that Mike and I get out of doing this is all of the interaction with other modelers. I mean, that's one of the big enjoyments of this hobby is we're all weird in the same particular way. And, we love interacting with folks and having folks write us and message us and email us and whatever, just with their takes on what we've said. We're we're looking for input.
So send us an email at plasticmodelmojo@gmail.com, or you can come through like Mr. Dinklow did through the messenger system on Facebook. Either way is fine. We look forward to hearing from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And while you're sitting there getting ready to formulate an email or instant message to us, while you're listening to this podcast, or at the end when you're done, if you take a moment and go to whatever podcast app you're using to listen to our podcast, rate the podcast, give it 5 stars. We'd appreciate it. It helps with the algorithm and makes the podcast more visible to more people. The other thing you can do for us is tell somebody. If you like listening to these things, if you're enjoying the podcast, you've all got modeling friends out there. We all know somebody else. Tell them about it. Tell them you enjoy it. Get them hooked up with it. Get them listening. We appreciate that. And our listener base is growing every episode. And it really inspires Mike and I to sit down and take the time that it takes to actually do these episodes. So we appreciate that.
Well, and we're not the first game in town or the only game in town. If you're listening to us, you got to also check out the Scale Model Podcast out of Canada, On the Bench out of Australia, the Plastic Posse Podcast and the Model Geeks Podcast, both out of the USA, and Just Making Conversation out of the United Kingdom. If you're in the English language world, we pretty much got you covered on most of the corners of the planet here. In addition to the podcasts, please check out our non-podcast content creators. We have our friend Stephen Lee with Sprue Pie and Frets. Always some good opinions out there on what's going on in the hobby world. Chris Wallace with Model Airplane Maker. Jeff Groves, the Inch Eye Guy. And Jim Bates, our guest at the last episode, Scale Canadian TV. You can always check out his musings on YouTube. It's always a good time.
Also, finally, if you're not a member of your IPMS national organization, IPMS USA or IPMS Canada or IPMS Australia or wherever you happen to be listening to us, please take a moment to find your national organization and join your IPMS national organization. I'm a member of both IPMS USA and IPMS Canada. They are both premier modeling organizations run by dedicated volunteers who don't get paid for any of this. They're just doing their part to make the hobby a better place. They produce fantastic magazines. They help organize and ensure model contests. They do lots of good things behind the scenes that most modelers never see. So it's, the memberships are not very expensive. Go ahead, join your national organization. You won't regret it.
Well, it's time for Countdown to Vegas.
I'm telling you what, man, I cannot wait.
We are inching closer. At the time of this recording, we are 163 days away from the 2021 IPMS National Convention in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yay!
Getting there, man. Getting there.
It'll be here before you know it.
Which is great. It's also sad because it means summer will be over.
Yeah, well, summer happens in a blink of an eye, man. Winter goes by slow. I swear February lasts 6 months, but summer goes by in the blink of an eye.
I had a great week last week, and I must have just been reveling in that because I did not get a hold of Bob this past week or last 2 weeks. And Bob Lamasaro, I apologize for not getting with you, but I can say a few things here. I'm sure there are still trophy sponsorship packages that need to be bought up. So if that's something you're considering, please do that. The model registration forms are up on the website. So if you want to get an early start on getting your model registration forms filled out, because you're going to bring a ton of models, right?
Yes, because we've all been building for 2 years now.
You can get those filled out and get a jump on that. In addition, general registration opens April 1st. So that's just around the corner. It's tonight is March 8th. So you got about 3 weeks, and that's going to open up, and you can get the general registration form and get registered for the IPMS National Convention.
I highly recommend pre-registering, guys. Do it online. You don't want to end up at the convention wasting time standing in a line to register. Pre-registration helps the local show, or helps the national organization who's putting on the show. In-person registration is a burden on manpower, so don't waste time that you could be spending in the vendor room standing in line to register. Pre-register,
because somebody's going to buy that kit you were looking for.
Yes, they are. So, Mike, what's your benchtop look like? As if we all didn't know from Facebook.
It's covered with there's paint bottles everywhere.
Well, that's fitting considering what we're going to talk about tonight. But what's been going on the bench?
Well, per my update last episode, the E16 Paul is in the display case, not collecting dust, but not getting worked on.
Yeah,
I've got to push this anti-tank gun across the finish line. It's too close.
Yeah.
So I've been working through all the paint distressing and the chipping, which I've started, which, all that stuff's still kind of new to me. I tell you, I've severely underestimated the volume of work.
I agree with you. It is amazing to me. I've just started that stage on the M30, and I have now come to the realization that it's probably going to be as much time weathering the model as everything up to the weathering of the model. And that's what I've said to Jim Bates before, and I may have said it to you. We watch Uncle Night Shift's videos. I don't think most of us appreciate the amount of time that goes into what shows up in a 20-minute video that he does. That the amount and time of actual bench time doing all of those things.
Well, it's going to take a while. I worked all weekend on the gun breech area, and that's what I showed on Facebook. And it's not done yet. And I've really only got the loader's side done. I got to flip it around, and it's not done though. I got to finish the loader's side, then move to the gunner's side, and then work toward the opposite side of the gun shield. And then there's a split trail, and then there's the wheels. Yeah. So it's going to take a while. I think I'm enjoying it.
Well, you're doing new things. You're acquiring new skills, just like, and we'll talk about it in the main section, but new painting techniques, that's adding arrows to your quiver.
It is. I'm pleased the way it looks so far. I'm going to try to underdo it, not overdo it.
Sure.
And other than the gun, I've not done much on the other parts. I've not done any more work on the base in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'll understand it. I had a good week last week all around, but I just didn't get a lot of modeling done. I got some done this weekend, but hopefully I'll keep, no pun intended, but chipping away at this thing.
Oh, that was bad. That raises an interesting question. Do you think that, you're talking about doing most of these things for the first time. Do you think that as you do it regularly and more often, that maybe that will speed up your process?
I think so. I think a lot of this was kind of like jumping off the high dive at the pool for the first time.
Yeah, the first time you do it, you stand there a long time at the edge.
Yeah, because you can't just see to the top of the water. You can see all the way to the bottom of the diving well, which is,
Yeah.
The water's like 12 feet below you, but the bottom of the diving well is like 30 feet below you.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think so. I think it'll probably speed up as I do it.
Yeah.
On this particular model, but I really liking the way it's looking. So
Well, good.
We'll keep trucking on. But that's all I'm working on. Nothing else right now.
That single-minded focus. That's great.
Well, I had to, or it's not going to get finished.
Yep.
All right. What's up with you?
Well, I am working almost exclusively on the Mosquito in the last 2 weeks. I've got it to the point where the major sub-assemblies are coming together. The whole thing's about to be in basically one solid piece soon. If I don't drive myself blind, putting on wing lights, I have managed to clip off and lose while attempting to drill 2 of the 4 wingtip lights, which has taught me that I really cannot rely on my eyesight. I need to wear my optivisor all the time, or nearly all the time, while I'm modeling, because I think both losses are probably a result of that, me thinking that my vision is better than it is. I think I said last time that I think one of the reasons I'm concentrating so heavily on the Mosquito is a combination of wanting to get progress made on the Mosquito, but it also gives me an excuse not to move forward on the M30. And I'm at the top of that at that diving board, looking down into the bottom of the well, and man, that looks like a ton of work. So I like what I've done so far, but I just need to swallow the fear and move forward with it. Because once I do it, I've actually enjoyed the weathering. I'm at the pin wash stage on one of the split trails, and I've already worked on the wheels and really like how they've come out. So I just need to stop procrastinating and switch back and forth between the Mosquito and the M30. And then the TU-20 128's kind of pushed off to the side at the moment, just simply because of the fact that I'm got these 2 more than enough to occupy me back and forth right now. But I will be bringing that back fairly soon. Mike, have you been browsing the internet, seeing what's coming out lately? Got anything that interests you?
I have.
Like what?
Well, this may be a rabbit hole or a squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
Parcel Miniatures out of Vietnam has released a set of really sweet-looking Imperial Japanese Army tank riders.
Now, say that again for me.
Imperial Japanese Army.
Right. Out of what modeling company? Out of what country?
Parcel Miniatures. They're out of Vietnam.
Really? I don't think I have ever heard of any model producer or figure producer out of Vietnam before.
They make a lot of really nice Viet Cong and NVA figures.
Well, they've got the research.
Well, I'm sure. And those would definitely be a rabbit hole. They're nice. And it's like, yeah, but I've not really connected with those. They're nice figures, but this set of Japanese, these figures are really, really cool looking. And I know I've got at least one fine molds Japanese tank back there in the stash in the furnace room. So
do I.
So
I may have 2.
You may. I could see me buying these. There's 4 tank riders and a tank commander, and they sell the big set like Stalingrad Miniatures does. You can buy 2 figure sets, or you can buy the whole thing at once.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm interested in this.
I do. Japanese armor is so underrepresented in modeling and in dioramas that I just, every time I see a well executed Pacific or Burma, India, or Philippines diorama, I mean, there's something that draws you to them because they're not, one of 35 Panthers on the table or 35 Tiger tanks on the table. Some of that stuff is just really, really neat looking.
Well, check these out. They're, I think I saw them on the Modeling News web blog.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. I need to go to modeling news more often.
Really, really, really nice, nice set of figures. Well, what about you? What's your best favorite?
Well, there's a company out of Japan called Ushi. Now, that's not the German company Ushi. This is USHI. And I first became familiar with them because they made two sets of Japanese Navy World War II aerial armament, bombs, basically. Um, there are two sets of them that I came across. And amazingly enough, Japanese World War II bombs are not a common item. A lot of kits don't include them. If they do, they're very basic. And they're up until this, there's really been no aftermarket. And they made this two sets of Navy bombs, and I got them from Hobby Link Japan and really liked them. And they've just released two sets of Imperial Japanese Army bombs. And you would think, well, wait a minute, aren't they the same? The answer is no. The Japanese Army and the Japanese Navy hated each other and did not cooperate in the least during World War II, and definitely did not share ordnance. There was no common ordnance. Oh, I forget the name of the writer. I listened to a lecture once, and he was talking about the 1944-45 bombing assault on Japan by the U.S. Army Air Corps. And the Japanese Army and the Japanese Navy were so uncooperative with each other, they did not even share radar intelligence. So there were mountains where you had a Japanese Navy radar set on the mountain talking to the Navy, and the Japanese Army radar set on the mountain talking to the Army, but neither one talked to each other. But these are, like I said, Japanese World War II is one of my areas of interest. So these tickle a spot for me, and I'm definitely going to be picking them up.
Now, my next one is not something I'm going to build most likely, but I think it's a winner.
Okay.
Also off the modeling news recently, Revell put out their releases for, I don't know if it was for 2021 or just March.
Right.
They're doing a VW microbus in 124 scale.
I think that you mean the old the 1960s.
60s, 70s microbus, yeah.
Yeah, I think what they call the 16 window bus.
No, not the 16 window bus. That's a real early one, but the more common one.
Gotcha.
There's two kits. One's a snap kit, but one's a more traditional, many part type, over 100 part glue together kit. And I think that's going to be a good kit for them.
Oh, that sounds good.
It's a popular subject.
I could see that being very popular.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think I'll end up with one, but I could see the popularity, and I thought it was interesting.
Oh, and I'm sure it would. I mean, you could do a really nice buildup of it because they had some really fantastic color combinations.
Well, you got another winner?
Well, this may be a winner. It's out of a company that I guess is out of Australia. So we're going to have to get the on the bench guys to tell us more about this. A company called Hamilton Hobbies AU has announced a C130H post-1990s update set for the new Zvezda C130H.
That didn't take long.
No, and I figured it would. I suspect this is going to be just the tip of the C130 iceberg. That kit has so much pent-up demand behind it. I think you're going to see tons of companies doing C130 sets for the Zvezda kit. This is just the first one I've happened to see. I don't know what it's like. I've just seen the announcement of it. And if any listener out there knows anything more about it, I would love to hear it because it certainly piques my interest.
Well, I'm not sure about my next one yet.
Okay.
It's a collaboration between DOS Work and Amusing Hobby. And they're doing a Ram Tiger.
Oh, my God. I have seen this thing, and I'll be honest with you, it was on my list for a yawn.
Well, maybe for me too. Now, I tell you, this is a great one for the paint and weather guys because of the big slab sides on it. But to be honest, there's just not much to it. And it just looks like a big sow bug, you know?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm curious, somebody's going to do something brilliant with this thing, and I'll still think it's not something I ever want to build, but it'll be impressive because it'll be big.
Yeah.
But for me, that's probably a yawn, but I'm curious to see where this goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the paper panzers for me all tend to be pretty much be yawns, but there's plenty of people out there that's their thing. Well, I've got one more yay, and that is a company out of Canada called Matnick Decals, Matnic Decals, is doing 2 sheets of decals for the Avro Canada CF100 Canuck, the indigenously built Canadian jet fighter of the 50s and 60s. Or 60s, I guess. They look really nice. More CF100 decals are always welcome. My hope is that this will prompt somebody other than Hobbycraft to release an actual good kit of the CF100. It is a hole that, I suspect it's a hole because it was used only by the Canadians, and then I think the Belgians used some, but so it was fairly long serving, but didn't get a wide sales as far as across a bunch of countries. But it's a beautiful airplane. It screams that 60s aesthetic, and there are numerous sets of different camouflage and markings, and so these decals are great. Now all we got to do is sit and wait for the modeling gods to give us a new kit.
This is kind of backwards.
Yes, that's right. If you build it, they will come.
Well, I've got a yawn, and it came to us from Stephen Lee, who sent it up as his vote for the yawn of the month. Gecko Models is releasing a 1/35th scale skid loader.
Yes, a
Bobcat.
Right. What we commonly call a Bobcat, but a Bobcat is a trade name of a particular item, whereas this is the generic skid loader Bobcat. I've seen that. I'm sure somebody's going to, just like those darn pigeons, somebody's going to do a diorama, and it's going to be fantastic. And you're going to go, man, why didn't I think of that? But I sure can't picture it in my head right now.
To get the construction guys, you'd think kit would be better served in like 24th scale or 25th scale or something like that.
Yeah.
But here it is in armor scale, 35th. So,
but now keep in mind, just in the last few years, we have seen a couple of pieces of farm equipment, tractors and such, and bulldozers in 35th scale. Now, mostly they're in the military setting. That's true. But, maybe it's an area of growth that we're just not tapped into. I don't know.
That's possible. So we wish Gecko Models good luck with this one. But, they got some other models that are kind of interesting, so we won't dog them too hard.
No.
Just interesting choice of subjects.
It is. It is definitely.
Well, we're going to break here and have a little word from our sponsor, Dave.
Absolutely.
Plastic Model Mojo is now brought to you by Model Paint Solutions, your source for Harder Steenbeck airbrushes, David Union power tools, and laboratory-grade mixing, measuring, and storage tools for use with all your model paints, be they acrylic, enamels, or lacquers. Check them out at www.modelpaintsolutions.com. Well, we're back. We've re-beered, and we're ready to go again.
Did you re-beer or re-bourbon?
I'm out. I re-beered. I'm into the Narragansett now. So
okay, well that's a good beer. It's
it's not Gumball Head, but
well, no. But if you can't have Gumball Head, it's
It'll get the yard mowed.
Yeah, that is exactly what it's exactly like Blue Moon. That's what Blue Moon is for. Blue Moon will get the yard mowed on a hot day.
Our special segment tonight: paint the town red, but with enamels, lacquers, or acrylics. You know, Dave, we don't, but I can understand folks coming back into this hobby after being gone a number of years or decades.
Yeah.
It's probably a little tough on the paint front. You ever go to the grocery store and you're looking for something and you go to one of those big stores and there's just, I don't know what, maybe
There's
it's beer,
too much.
maybe it's tea. I don't know. Or cereal.
Yeah.
There's just so damn much. You can't make up your mind.
Yeah. And you don't want to know what half of it is.
That's right. I think we're in the golden age, and it's kind of bled over into hobby paints. And this isn't going to be a how to use all this stuff. This is going to be a kind of a general discussion of what's going on. So, because we joke about it, you know, oh my God, another paint line.
Yep.
It's like one every other month.
It is.
So I, just off the top of my head, now these are paint lines that I consider geared toward the plastic model hobbyist.
Yeah.
We have Tamiya out of Japan, which I think has 3 lines of paint. They have their hybrid acrylic line. They've got an enamel line, and they've got a new just coming onto the show here, a lacquer line. So you got Tamiya with 3.
And then you got Mr. Color out of Japan too.
Hang on.
Okay.
We got Humbrol out of the UK.
Yeah.
Who I think, do they still have an acrylic line?
They have an acrylic and an enamel line.
So they've got 2. We've got Color Coat out of the UK.
Yeah.
We got GSI or Gunsanyo Industries. They've got 2 major lines of paint. They've got their. Is it a lacquer or is it a hybrid like Tamiya?
Well, the only one I've ever used is their lacquer, their true lacquer.
Is it a true lacquer? I don't know if it is or not. But they've got their aqueous line too.
Yeah.
So they've got 2.
I've never used that.
We got Vallejo out of Spain.
Yeah.
Who has, well, it's a huge range, but really their bottled paint, there's kind of 3 series. There's their standard model color range. There's the game color range, and there's the what's the Panzer Aces line.
Yes.
So it's a lot of paint, but we got Life Color out of Italy. We got AK Interactive out of Spain, which has their 2 major lines are their Gen 3 acrylic dropper bottle paints and their real color lacquers, or they may be a hybrid too. I don't know if they're more like the
they're an acrylic lacquer, yeah.
So they're like the Tamiya.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of peripheral, metallic ranges too, stuff like that. So they got more than 2, but the big ones are 2. We've got Ammo of MIG out of Spain, Ammo from MIG Jimenez. He's got an acrylic line. We have Hataka Paints out of Poland. They've got an acrylic line and a lacquer line.
Yeah.
MRP or Mr. Paint, I think that's out of the U.S.
I believe so.
That's a lacquer.
Yeah.
Scale Model Supply out of Australia is a lacquer.
Yeah.
Mission Models out of the U.S. is an acrylic.
Yeah.
Revell runs a line of paint out of the EU. That's an acrylic. Little square bottles. You've seen them?
Yeah. Yep.
And then there's a Acan out of Russia.
Yeah.
Which is, they have 2 lines. They have an acrylic line and a lacquer line.
Yeah, they do.
So that's just off the top of my head, just writing crap down at lunchtime today.
Yeah.
What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 16 manufacturers. And it's like 22 paint lines out of that.
Yeah. And there are more. I'm sitting here looking, as we're talking, I'm sitting here looking at my desk and my model paint collection in my storage container. I count at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 different paint at least one bottle of one type of paint from at least 15 different manufacturers.
On my bench right now on the Zis 2 project, I have a lot of bottles of paint. Five different makers, 3 different formulations. So it's pretty confusing, I would think, for a lot of folks.
I'll tell you what, I pity the guy coming into the hobby today, just entering the hobby, wants to get an airbrush and start painting, having to learn the difference between a water-based acrylic and an alcohol or lacquer-based acrylic and a true lacquer and an enamel and what paints you can thin with what thinners. And I mean, that learning curve, it used to be there were like 2 or 3 types of paints. They were mainly enamels. There was poly S if you wanted to do an acrylic, and that was it. It was pretty easy to figure out what paint you were going to use. I pity the guys coming in trying to swallow this amount of information. And I'll tell you, sometimes it even mystifies me as to, okay, now I think this will work with this, but sometimes I have to test it out, which, by the way, I do regularly recommend. Have a paint mule test stuff out. Don't try something new on the model that you've completed building and are trying to paint.
Well, let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
What did you cut your neophyte scale modeler teeth on? Now, I don't mean the kid square bottle testers. Maybe you did, but when you made the decision, when it flipped in your head that this was your hobby and you were gonna, you got into the magazines and the hobby shops and all that, what were you using?
Oh, there's no question. For the vast majority of my modeling life, I've used exactly one line of paints, maybe 2. I may have started with Humbrels in the tins. And then when Model Master became available, I've used Model Master pretty much for 90% or 80% of my modeling life. They were enamels, and one of the virtues of enamels is they're very forgiving when airbrushing. They were easy to use. They were widely available because they were made here in the U.S. And I, some people had love-hate relationships with them, but I'll tell you, I really liked spraying them, and I wish the line wasn't going away.
Well, I was one of those people because they're metallics and don't ever dry.
Oh yeah, well yeah. Oh, that is true. And one of the pluses of all these divergent lines of paint now is that you have choices to do specific things like metallics, sprayed metallics, Alclad 2 from here till the end of time for me. They work for me. I love them. They're very easy to use. They give you a great finish. And that wasn't available when you were trying to use the metallizers from Model Master. They were awful. They never dried. They didn't look right. Although ironically, if you were working on something where you just needed to pick out a detail, they actually didn't brush paint too bad. You could actually brush paint the metallizer metallics, to highlight gear or stuff like that, little details. But as far as airbrushing, it was awful.
Well, for me, like everybody else, I was using the Tester square bottles for the longest time.
Yeah.
But once it flipped and I was in my head, and I was like, yeah, I kind of like this. And I started buying the model magazines and going to the hobby shops. I got into Pactra paints.
Yeah.
They're Authentic International Color Series. Remember those?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sitting here. I've still got on a carousel about 16 of these things.
God, God, those have to be, Mike, those have to be 30 years old.
They are. They're 30 years old. Absolutely. Now, every year I throw away a couple because they dry out, but
Yeah.
I reconstitute them about every other year, see if I can. This line of paint was kind of the U.S. domestic answer to Humbrol's authentic color range.
Yep.
And I would argue it's the first line of paint that actually had weathering colors in it.
Well, didn't they have at least a track color?
Well, Humbrol had a track color.
Right, I knew that.
But the Pactra had mud and earth, and they actually had they had a weathering solution that was a really thin wash that you could buy, and it just, it made dusty crap all over your model when it dried. But yeah. It was kind of new, and these, they had all the colors for the different nations and the weathering colors, and that's kind of what I cut my teeth on. This stuff airbrushes horribly.
Yeah.
It's not very good paint, to be honest, but that's what I started using. I still got some of it, so that's old. That's nostalgia there. Now, a little later, the shop got the Humbrol rack, and I've used a lot of that over the years. And in the 80s, mid 80s, the Tamiya rack landed.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different topic there, but that's what I cut my teeth on. Pretty much the Pactra.
I never made the big move over from Humbrol to Tamiya. I moved to Model Master, and because for me it worked so well, I never felt the compelled to try the Tamiya stuff. And when I did, I will be honest with you, it getting my head around back then, the fact that this was not an enamel paint and didn't behave like an enamel paint was kind of tough for me. So I guess I never really got into using a lot of the Tamiya paints. And then of course I did try a little bit of it for brush painting, detail stuff, and that is just not a good paint to brush paint with.
Well, what is your favorite type of paint and why?
Well, enamels for me are my favorite type of paint. Model Master or Color Coats or Humbrol, although the new Humbrol does not seem to be quite the same as the old Humbrol, which was really enjoyable to airbrush. The reason I like it is enamels are so forgiving as far as you do not have to be a chemist to mix the paint. Eyeballing it gets you there. They don't, because of their enamels, they don't have quite the problems with tip dry that lacquers, acrylics, water-based acrylics and alcohol-based acrylics can have. I like enamels, and then I like true lacquers as well. Alclad is apparently coming out of with a line of lacquer paints, not just they're metallic, but they're going into regular colors. And I'll be honest with you, I'm interested to try those out because I like spraying Alclad. Now, the downside of both enamels and true lacquers are the VOCs. It's not good for your lungs to be inhaling a lot of that crap. So, if you spray enamels and lacquers, you need an air booth and you need to use it. And in addition, belt and suspenders approach, you probably ought to have a respirator. I don't always do that. I will admit that. I spray them with the air booth on, but no respirator, because it kind of gets in the way. But I understand the attraction of acrylics from the standpoint that they are much safer. But I'm an enamel guy, and I probably will be as long as they are still making enamel paints.
Well, if they're making lacquers, they're going to be making enamels. Just
Yes.
unless nobody buys them.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I alluded to it a second ago. When the Tamiya rack landed at the hobby shop back home when I was growing up, I'd already had my first airbrush by then, and I I really got into them, and I really like the way they spray, and I think they're fairly forgiving on the thinning. And I've for base coating, they've been my go-to for pretty much since they've been available in the United States. I think
Yeah.
it's a long time at this point. Now, since then, I've gotten into some of the AK real colors, and I just sprayed my first GSI paint, Mr. Color paint,
Yeah.
very recently as well, and I find them all similar.
I will tell you, this M30 is the first time I have really used the AK real colors. And I've got to say that thinned with unicorn tears, that is the one paint line that I could see myself regularly using if all enamels went away. I could see myself using that particular paint line for the majority of my painting needs, because while it's not quite as forgiving as enamels, thinned with the Mr. Color leveling thinner, it's pretty close. And I love the finish. Nice, smooth, hard finish.
And a lot of the paints I select are they're purpose driven. I use the Tamiyas and the AKs, and now the Mr. Colors for kind of my base coating and your initial painting. But for brush painting, figures or whatever, really details. I'm a big Vallejo fan, and I've got a lot of that.
I have a fair amount of it too. I hate those damn squeeze bottles. But and God, that paint is so hard once it separates to get it to mix back into solution. It takes you really need one of those paint shakers or whatever that thing is that you've got, to get a bottle of that Vallejo to mix back once it's separated. But that is the thing I was going to mention to you. I talked about all the paints I've got on my table right now and all the different paint lines. And I think that a lot of that is driven by the new finishing techniques that have developed over the last 15 years. I mean, 15, 20 years ago, I could get my Model Master paints, paint my model. Any weathering I did mostly with pastels, chalk pastels, or maybe a little bit of airbrush technique, but again with the Model Master paint. And that was it. But now with the development of so many techniques in weathering and finishing a model, it calls for more and different types of paints. Tube oils and low odor mineral spirits, Vallejo, or to do chipping, the watercolor pencils from AK to do finishing. I mean, finishing a model has ballooned into, from the final step to almost a co-equal level of with construction, that it takes now as long or longer to paint and weather a model as it did to build it. And that's not the way it used to be, at least not for me.
No, I agree with that. I used to be able to get away with a lot simpler weathering techniques on armor models for sure.
Yep. And I do think that's part of where this impetus for all these different paint lines, and then even inside paint lines, every 2 weeks, AK is coming out with oil brushers or dry brushing paint, or their acrylic weathering gunk or whatever. It just, the multiplication, even inside one company's lines. AK is probably the most blatant example of that, but to some extent, everybody's doing it.
Well, there's a lot. Is there anything you've tried recently that surprised you?
Yes. When working on the M30, I am trying these color modulation and highlighting techniques. And I was using the AK Real Colors combined with the Harder and Steenbeck Infinity Airbrush, thinned with Mr. Color leveling thinner. And, you know, as you're mixing, you've got your base color, then you're mixing in some tan and then maybe some tan and some white to get little different levels of highlight or color modulation. I was absolutely amazed that the combination of spraying the AK through the Harder and Steenbeck with the air pressure dialed down and the tip right on top of the model, it was almost like drawing with a pencil on what you were painting. The level of control and the level of putting the highlight just where you want it and how the highlight really popped. The nice thing about these AK colors is they mix very well. And so you can blend levels of highlight and shadow almost like you were doing with tube oils if you were painting a figure. And then there are things like glazes. You were talking to me earlier about how you're trying out some things with applying the paint as a very thin glaze. I don't think you could do that with an enamel in the old days and the regular Model Master thinner, and you know that was it. It's all this new stuff that allows us to do things like that.
Well, one I've tried recently, and it's all on the Zis 2 project that is on the gun breech. And I can't remember. I want to think it was from Julian at On the Bench in one of their recent episodes talking about the Citadel paints. Now,
Yeah.
Citadel is from Games Workshop out of the UK. Their primary customer base is Warhammer 40K gamers. And that's what the paint line is tailored for. But I can tell you the metallic paints in this range are surprisingly good. And there's a color called Lead Belcher. It's a slightly dark silver color. It's not real dark. Mm-hmm. They've got another color that's even darker. I tell you, I like this stuff a lot. I like the paint a lot. I hate the container it comes in. I'll tell you that.
It's one of those flip top lid things.
Yeah, it's a paint catapult. That's what it is. I just about ruined the Zis when I opened this.
Yeah.
That was a damn close call. Oh my God. So the colors I picked up were Lead Belcher, which is kind of a gunmetal gray, and then Iron Breaker, which is an even lighter color. And I ended up using the Iron Breaker on the gun breech. In conjunction with those, Citadel makes a lot of shading colors and thinner colors.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where these names come from. The game, I guess. There's a shading color called Nuln Oil, Nuln, and there's two varieties in the paint range. There's the standard Nuln Oil, and it's basically a thin black wash is what it is. Dark gray, maybe. And there's a Nuln Oil Gloss. And when you apply this over top of that Iron Breaker silver metallic, or the other one, the Lead Belcher, it gives a really, really neat look. And what I'm trying to do on the gun breech of this Zis is have all the metal in the white inside the gun breech, unpainted. And there's a lot of red colored grease that's in there as well to keep all the moving parts moving, right? So I'm trying to use, I'm probably going to use this no gloss to try to get that a little bit shiny looking, to make that grease look wet, and see how that goes. I don't know. I heard about these through on the bench, and I'm giving them a go. And I'm kind of liking the way it's looking. So,
well, and you know what? That one again, I keep saying we live in the golden age of modeling, and I think that's probably true as far as paint goes too. Because back when there was Humbrol and Tamiya and Model Master, and that was pretty much it. You couldn't pull off a technique like this, or it would be much more difficult to do. Whereas now you've got something, store bought, ready, available that allows you to pull off that effect. And that's something we didn't have 30 years ago.
So on this project, I've got 2 boils, I've got my Vallejos, I've got these Citadels. Those are all acrylics, the Vallejos and the Citadels. I'm using a life color paint for some of my chipping effects. It's an acrylic paint. And I've got a Tamiya Panaline Accenter I'm using, which is it's an enamel product. So what's that? 3 formulations.
Exactly.
So you got to know how each one of them behaves and what you can do with each. And I tell you what it does. It lets you do a base out of the acrylic, and it's dry in 10 minutes, right?
Right.
Then you come over with one of these lacquer based or enamel based products and go right over top of it.
Yep.
Come back with white spirits and peel it back to whatever effect you want, and it won't affect the base coat.
Yep. And that is the other thing I was talking about, pitying guys who come into the hobby right now with all of this stuff. You almost have to learn a little chemistry to know what goes over what and what you can use to peel it back and what won't attack the underlying finish and what will. It's a lot more to learn in the old days when it was just enamels, acrylics, and if you used enamel thinner on an enamel, it'll pull it up, or it just, there's a lot more technique. When you were listing off there the stuff you had used so far on the Zis, I mean, you used several different type of paints with several different chemical formulations, using several different techniques to apply them, and some layered over top of each other. And that really requires a lot more brain box as far as learning this stuff. And again, I think that goes back to something that I've said, that the best thing you can do in modeling is model. If you're constantly building and you're constantly doing the painting and these techniques, you'll remember what goes over what and what you can use with what, and you'll get better and better at it. Whereas if you spend long time away from the bench, or you go long time without having something in the paint booth that you're weathering, it's not like riding a bicycle. You lose those skills, or at least some part of them.
Oh, I agree with that. And yeah, I think the more you use this stuff, the more it's in your brain that, okay, I'm going to use this for this part of the process, and this for the second part, third part, and so on. But there's just a lot to it, and you end up with a lot of paint.
Yep, you do. I mean, paint storage is one of my big challenges. I've got more paint strewn about than almost anything else, and I've got to struggle to keep it organized. In fact, you were over the other day. You gave me a great suggestion that I forget where you had picked it up, about how to store your paint.
Well, and it's not uncommon for me to have the same color in at least 2 different formulations.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd mentioned to you not too long ago about picking up that Hataka set for the pre-war Polish colors, and
Yep.
getting both the lacquer and the acrylic set.
Well, and you can see where that would come in. By the way, you wonder sometimes why a manufacturer might run 2 ranges, acrylic and lacquer. That's a perfect example. You want to pick up both sets. You might want to use the lacquer for your base coat and the acrylic for your chipping and weathering, or vice versa, however you choose to do it. But by having both of those ranges out of a single manufacturer, you get color consistency within that project. Now, I'm not as huge on color consistency as a lot of people may be, because let's face it, the base coat is never the finished color when you've put all this other stuff over it. But
No.
it really does make it easier, I think, if you've got, like I said, the two sets from Hitaka of the same colors in both formulations.
Which was exactly my thinking.
And now I've got to buy both of those sets. Thank you very much. Because I'm going to build that. I'm going to build the TKS and or the 7TP, and I'm going to need those colors.
Well, so will I. Anything else you want to talk about, paint?
We could do this all night long. I've still got a little bit of beer left in the glass, but probably we're getting on to about the time where we better wrap this up.
Well, folks can tell us what they think about the paint situation and what they like, and any tips they may have. We'd love to hear that. So
absolutely,
let us know. I know we didn't get into the technical aspects of using them, but just kind of a high level is what's out there and kind of the situation we're in with all these paints right now.
Do you have a shout out for this month?
Well, I've got some shout outs for the latest contributors to the efforts here at Plastic Model Mojo. James Culata, Alec Krakava, and Christopher Church have all become donors to our cause here. So we appreciate that, guys.
I appreciate it because it's allowed us to upgrade some equipment, and hopefully you'll notice the sound difference from that upgraded equipment.
And hopefully we'll start the road show up too.
April's going to be here soon, man.
So thank you guys for that. And if anyone else would like to make a contribution to the efforts at Plastic Model Mojo, you can do so by going to www.plasticmodelmojo.com. And in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you'll see a heart icon. You can use that to go to a direct PayPal contribution. Also, that same link can be found in any of the show notes that are on that website for any given episode. So thank you for all those who have donated, and for these three gentlemen for doing so in the last couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Well, Mike, I'd like to shout out a podcast, but not exactly a modeling podcast. It's a World War II history podcast called We Have Ways. It is by historian James Holland and comedian Al Murray. And they do a twice a week podcast on aspects of World War II history. The discussions are wide ranging. Lately, they've been doing a series called Family Stories, where listeners have contributed stories from their family's experience, passed down through returning veterans. And they've come up with some amazing stories of, people's service in World War II. It's a funny podcast, given Al Murray, the comedian's participation. They have really good guests on for interviews. I highly recommend if once you're done listening to all the model podcasts out there and you're looking for more podcast content, summer's coming up. You're going to be out in the yard doing yard work a lot. So you're going to need a lot of podcast content. I highly recommend We Have Ways.
All right, Dave. Well, I think we're coming to the end unless you have another shout out.
Nope. I think we're at the end.
As they say, Dave, so many kits.
So little time, Mike.
All right. Well, we'll catch you next time, man.
You got it. You take care.